Hey, hey. All right. Happy Monday night. Hope you guys are having a good week, good start to your week, had a good weekend. Go ahead and run it down tonight. Here on the live, we talk about all the different things we usually get into. If you have questions on XRP, tends to be people's favorite topic, which you can't blame them. It's my favorite topic too. Anything to do with wealth management, mitigating taxes, setting yourself up for success on the other side of a liquidity event, exit strategies. You don't have to disclose anything personal, but if you have some questions that you think might be relevant to other people around specific things within estate planning or strategic exits, would love to get into that with people. Mr. Nobody says, win yen. So that's definitely some of the stuff we'll talk about tonight. Get into global macroeconomic events, some of the catalysts that I see on the horizon for appreciation and adoption of some of these networks, and the implications of some of those things as they transpire. So on the horizon, we'll get into some good news. Good news first. The CME went live today to be able to track real-time data on XRP and ICP. So that was exciting. Lots of people putting. Then you've got just a lot of global macroeconomics things shifting. Big news out of the conference this weekend for Bitcoin. You had Kennedy and Trump both championing Bitcoin. You also had Senator Loomis launch a bill. We'll see if it goes through or not, but they, proposing that the U.S. Treasury hold a portion of the reserves in Bitcoin. Seems very bullish for Bitcoin, which, is a good thing for the industry as a whole. I have my own thoughts about, what actually shakes out for Bitcoin, which is very different, radically different than the majority of people. I hope I'm wrong. I have clients that hold significant allocations to Bitcoin and believe in it wholeheartedly. We have discussions about it, and I provide my 2 cents, but that's what it's about, what it's worth. Because I've been wrong for a long time when it came to Bitcoin. I've been parked in XRP, and we know how that's turned out. So I think I'll have my day in the sun. I think a lot of us will have our day in the sun. But up to this point, constraints remain the same, and if things do remain the same and there are no changes to regulation, Tether stays where it's at. You don't have CBDCs. You don't have global adoption of these networks at scale for other use cases outside of just speculation. It's likely that things will persist in the patterns and directions that they have in the past. But the winds of change are coming, in my opinion. So without further ado, we will go ahead and hop down into the chat here. I don't say this enough. People get on to me. Like and subscribe. Share with your friends if you think this is valuable. It is much appreciated, and it does help get this out to more people. If you guys think it's valuable and it's relevant, hopefully it is for other people too. So with that, we'll get running. Rob says, considering the trust that your character engenders, what is the source of Jake's moral compass? Thank you for all you do. Appreciate that, Rob. Core values, right? So what I work with people on when they come to the family office is a family charter or a family compass or a family constitution. All of those would be correct terms to describe what we put together. But you have a mission statement for your family. I think that just like a business, your family should have a mission statement. And then, again, similar to a business, you should have core values and principles that you abide by. You can't ever predict every circumstance that's going to happen, especially if you're thinking like a family office over a century, right? Like if you're thinking in 100-year long time frames, then you're not going to know what technologies exist, maybe even 20 years from now in comparison to today, with the rate at which things are happening. So the only way that you can really position your family and set them up for success is give them a moral compass, like you've stated here, with core values and principles. And if you have that, then they can look at the decisions through those lens when they go to make them, with whatever context exists at the time, and then be able to make the right decision for the family long term. So I have those, and I try to think through those things. I have mentors that I really just look at things like on the long term, and sometimes I'm short-sighted and I make mistakes just like everybody else. Wisdom, in my opinion, is knowing the long-term effects of your decisions today. And sometimes I'm not as wise as I would like to think I am. But I always try to think through that lens when I'm making decisions. What are the long-term impacts of this? And then, you kind of weigh those things with opportunity costs and everything else. So it's a decision-making process, I guess, would be the moral compass. And that's what I use to do those things. So thank you for the good question. And hopefully, if we get to engage with a lot of the people in this community, which I think we will, I think a lot of people will be in a position where they have enough wealth that you do want to make sure that it's protected and you're able to pass it on, but you also want to make sure that the people that you're passing it on to have a moral compass or a code or a charter that allows them to, continue in the direction that you set them out on and not waver a few generations down the line. BVW says, Jake, huge fan. Thank you. Appreciate you hopping on here and taking the time out to spend some time this evening. They asked, when we have XRP price appreciation, I'm wondering if I could come to your office to get the LLC set up and then go from there. I'd rather do everything face to face. So we work with a company in Wyoming to set things up. You can, come down here to Dallas. There's a lot of people that are in similar positions to yourself that I think will want to engage with us in person. We do have an office here. It's a co-working space. Just be transparent with you guys. It's a very nice location here in Dallas that's very affordable for what we do currently. I do think that there will come a point in the very near future as things escalate where we will get a physical location and we'll have people that show up to that physical location. I think there's a lot of benefit to be gained by being around all of your counterparts and people that you're working with in order to actually get stuff going. I think a lot of that's been lost with the work from home deal. There might be some metaverse type stuff that brings that back later on, but I don't think you can really substitute in person in an office, close proximity, the camaraderie that's built that way, and then also the synergies and the speed at which you can move on decisions and get things done in your business. I've done this remote thing for probably 2.5, 3 years now, originally on my own, and then we've scaled our companies and added personnel. It can be done. You have conversations on a regular basis and you do get to know people in some capacity, but it's still not the same as being in a physical office and location. So I do think that that'll be part of our business at some point in the not too distant future. And yeah, I would love to, have you or host you here in Dallas if that's something you're interested in. I anticipate that the LLC piece of this will still be a component, but trust will be a much larger component after price appreciation. Once you get north of $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, becomes a much better option at that point. You would still want an LLC outside of the trust. You might want one or a couple of them inside the trust also for different purposes. But yeah, happy to work with you on that whenever the time comes and you feel that it is appropriate. Alfredo, thank you for the super chat, brother. He says, hola. I've got my LLC today. Awesome. Wanted to give you a shout out and say thank you. Also, can I use Mercury Bank by itself, or do I have to open a separate account. Yeah, you can use Mercury Bank all by itself. I will say that the drawback to Mercury is that there are no physical locations. Um, they tend to be more crypto friendly than some of the other banks. If you haven't watched the video on how to set that account up, I would encourage you to do so. We do have that posted for people in the mastermind group. It's an easy walkthrough on everything that you need to put in there to actually get the account stood up and not have any issues. We've had continual issues with people saying things that you would think would be right, and then getting denied for their bank accounts, either through Mercury or any other large bank. You don't want to mention crypto. I will just say it that way. And for those that do want that information, like I said, you're welcome to join the mastermind. It's a lot of the other content and things we put together in there. If you paid for the LLC, you should get a link to that video in the follow-up email with your documents. So there's that. But yeah, I have accounts at Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Capital One, and Mercury, and a credit union. So diversified across a lot of different banks. I don't think Chase is going to go anywhere. Bank of America, I don't think is going to go anywhere. I like those because they have physical locations and they're almost everywhere globally, even. Except Hawaii, they don't have branches in. You said we didn't say aloha here. You said ola. Hawaii does not have Bank of America. They may have Chase. They haven't had a Bank of America since 1997, which I find weird. But that's when they closed the branch that was there. So Mercury, great choice. But I would look at having personal accounts and other accounts at other banks as well. Atlantic Living. Appreciate you hopping on as always. Always good questions. They ask, Trump said to never sell your Bitcoin at the conference. How low do you believe it will get again in the next bear market? Any thoughts on the price, what price will look like in 2026? I think Bitcoin goes one of two ways from here. Okay. I'm wrong, which is quite possible. And it does what everybody else thinks it does. Anytime everybody comes to the same conclusion, I'm not so sure on that. I start to question things. It seems like a foregone conclusion at this point, based on everybody else's consensus, that Bitcoin goes north of $100,000. I don't think so. I think we cap out at 75, 76,000, and then it moves lower from there. And when I say lower, I mean like substantially lower. And again, I don't want this to happen. I hope that I'm wrong. I think there will be a lot of people that are very upset if I'm right. And I think that it could trade even with gold, whatever gold's priced at. If you think gold's a fair value now, which I do, I think it could trade at the price of gold. I don't think that the network itself is viable if it's that low in price, especially at the point where it is in the halving cycle and the rewards that miners are getting. Energy costs would have to be substantially lower for people to still be mining on the network and for that to provide an incentive for it. That's kind of the conundrum, right? So like, does the underlying network itself continue to exist and validate transactions, or does it just stop and whatever Bitcoin's locked in wallet stays there, and there's like a layer 2, like a Lightning network or other networks that wrap the Bitcoin and use it as collateral on there, and you basically own interest to wallets, and maybe those wallets get moved into qualified custody, or I don't know. But you've asked specifically about 2026 here, so I'll speak to that. Bitcoin's price is either $5,000 or less, or if we had the same cycle pan out and it does go north of like 100,000, it runs up to like 150 or 200 this cycle, and it pulled back, I could see a circumstance in where it might pull back to like 50,000, 40,000. if that's how things play out. I don't think that would happen in 26. I think it would be 20. Well, I guess that would be the bottom of the cycle, right? If we have the bull run here in 24, almost 2 years after that before the halving, yeah, I could see. So either one of those two scenarios, either below 5,000 or somewhere between 40 and 50,000 if the market cycles continue as they are now. I think if an asset were to surpass Bitcoin in liquidity and market cap, I think that Bitcoin would fall apart very quickly. It's been number one for a very long time. There's a lot of things that are better suited for what it's trying to accomplish that exist. So those are these are just my opinions. Laugh at me, tell me I'm wrong, and again, if you have data that I don't, I very well could be. But good question. Joel Flynn says, would you expect alts to top? When would you expect alts to top? Before or after Bitcoin does? I think there's a scenario here in the short term where potentially Wednesday this week, we have the Fed meeting, and the Fed talks about pivoting at the next Fed meeting. I think they hold rates steady at this one. Or if they do pivot, either way, there's going to be euphoria in the market if they talk about dropping rates, either this week or the next Fed meeting in September. And so with that, I think we're going to see a big move up in the Russell, potentially Bitcoin gasping one last time higher, like I said, to 76,000 before it turns over and drops. And when it's doing that, I think you're going to see alts run. And I mean, like in a big way. I think alts are going to move like parabolic, along with the Russell. I think the Russell is going to break out higher as well. And that's going to be a risk-on move by everybody. You have a lot of other market dynamics outside of that are playing into that. I think a lot of people are moving to risk off. You see that by the price in gold and the move there. But I think people are concerned about treasuries. And with that, they're looking for alpha somewhere else, and I think that's in low caps right now. I think that's why you've seen an expansion there in the Russell, while the Dow and the NASDAQ and the S&P have started to turn over. So before or after Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin has either already topped or will top again shortly, again at 75, 76,000. And alts will run with Bitcoin. I don't own any Bitcoin. I would, even if I was a Bitcoin bull, there's not enough left there for me to own any. And if I did have a position in it, it would be very small. I would be in alts at this point because we're going to get a move in alts along with the move in Bitcoin, and the move in alts is going to be substantially more than what Bitcoin does, in my opinion. Cornell, they say once the domino theory begins, yen, treasuries, USDT, Bitcoin, stocks drop, would you expect XRP to drop in price right along with these? Enter panic, or would XRP remain relatively stable while we hodl? I think there's a circumstance where the judge releases all of the partnerships that Ripple has in a ruling, and the SEC has actually asked for that the redacted 1,700 partnerships by Ripple be made public. I think that's what happens, and I think it incites euphoria and buying when that takes place. I do anticipate a run-up previous to that actually coming out. People get word before things actually get released. And so I do think that XRP will move a pretty good clip before that happens, but I think that'll just throw gas on the fire when it does and justify the move higher to a lot of people. And I think at the same time is when the rest of that's going to play out. So while XRP is having euphoric price action moving higher, I think that the yen begins to crumble. causing treasuries to have issues, causing Tether to have issues. And then XRP is also in a position to take over the liquidity on exchanges, and then you get, and then even further exacerbates its move higher as exchanges start using it to provide liquidity for themselves aside from USDT and Bitcoin. I think I timed this really well when all that shakes out, and it's just going to be like a "how is this happening" moment for most people when they're watching it. So yeah, hold on. Peter says, always a pleasure to tune in. One of my favorite live shows on YouTube. Thank you, brother. That's really much appreciated. Glad you're here. I know it's late. And it's cool that people take time out of their evening to hang out with me and ask good questions. So I get a lot of fulfillment from this and do enjoy doing it. And it's because people like you come in here and hang out and, like I said, ask quality stuff. Ross is asked a question, kind of alluding to what I was talking about a little bit earlier. He says, would a Fed rate cut in September be bullish for crypto now? And how likely is that in your opinion? I would say extremely. They need a narrative for prices to move higher. Charts are showing. I'm not a chart guy. I follow chart people that are smarter than me, just like I do with everything else. I look across the board. I find other people that are extremely intelligent in whatever field they work in and consistently study. And then I watch them and then try to connect that with the other really smart people that I watch and then put it all together kind of like a puzzle. And it looks as though, based on a lot of the TA and the chart people that I regard as intelligent and well thought out, that we are going to move substantially higher, and a narrative or catalyst that would cause that. Again, Wednesday, I think we get some news that they're either going to pivot now or in September, and that causes people, because people always price it in. That's how markets work. It's always priced in. Whatever they think the next quarter is going to look like, or the next month, or the next 6 months, or the next year, on treasuries, on everything. People are always forward looking. So, what's actually happening now has already been priced in. What people think is happening over the next quarter gets priced in as well. And so if there is an announcement that they are officially going to drop rates in September, I think that's when you see the euphoric break and widening of breadth in all markets, and risk on takes off. And they need that expansion to be in place. Kind of like an opposing force. Retail always buys at the wrong time. I'll just say that. Most people get wrong-footed. Most of the institutions are using retail as exit liquidity in 99% of scenarios, like the Bitcoin ETF. You've seen the wallets that hold the most Bitcoin sell into the whole time, coming up to the ETF, and continued selling even here at the top as it's stabilized. They're selling into people purchasing the ETF. So that's retail buying. The big players and the whales that have held for a long time are selling off their positions and not rebuying Bitcoin right now. Just like I'm saying, I think alts have a significantly higher chance of greater upside than Bitcoin in the short term. And if you were somebody that's participated in this market for an extended period of time, that's how you're positioned at this point. You've sold off the majority of your Bitcoin on the way up, and now you've bought into alts at the bottom, and you're waiting for them to go. So, and I think they'll get it. I think, to your point here, if we do get some type of announcement that they're going to be cutting rates either now or in September, it's going to be extremely bullish for crypto and alts in particular. David, how are you, sir? He says, started the LLC last week. Awesome, brother. Join the mastermind today. Thank you for all that you do. Is the LLC a stepping stone to starting a trust? It is, yeah. So we've had a lot of people go through this process, and we've really refined it at this point to be able to mitigate taxes and set people up for the best optionality moving forward, and most flexibility too. So inside the LLC, you get a lot of benefits that you don't get in your just personal name. It gives you the flexibility to really go whatever direction you want with your long-term estate plan, while still having the capability to mitigate taxes in the short term if you plan to take profits, be able to fund insurance policies to be able to offset taxable income, and protect your assets using PPLI or some of the other strategies we use there. And really just gives you the full breadth of the tax code to be able to set yourself up for success. So a lot of people, if they do have dependents or descendants or people that they want to take care of, the next step after the LLC will be the trust. It might be a domestic asset protection trust. It might be a spendthrift trust. It might be a couple of different types of trust. In most circumstances, we do see a DAPT or a domestic asset protection trust, or you could call it a digital asset protection trust. I wouldn't be mad at you if you did. We set them up in Wyoming, and they are specific for digital assets. You may have an LLC also inside of that to be able to create a credit chassis and to be able to season that in so that you can work with investment banks and other things later on. A lot of the stuff that we'll be doing in the short term will just be collateralized loans, so you don't really need. It's not an absolute have to have, but it does help because then you can build credit for the LLC, and eventually you don't have to put personal guarantees on anything. The trust doesn't have to guarantee it, which is nice. So anyway, yes, to answer your question here, it is the first stepping stone in the process for not just the trust, but I would say 90% of the time the trust, and then the other 10% of the time you might look at different avenues to be able to structure your estate. But in most circumstances, that is the most logical next step. Cornell says, who owns the XRP used in an international between Bank A and Bank? I'm assuming you mean international transaction between Bank A and B. Would the XRP be owned by Ripple's ODL? If so, why would banks own their own XRP? Thanks. So owning XRP is multifaceted, just aside from being able to use it to send transactions. You could use ODL, but then you're paying a spread. You're paying Ripple. You're borrowing that XRP to be able to send those transactions. And as long as you're making enough money off of them to justify paying it back with interest, it's fine. In the future, I don't think that ODL will even exist. Just my 2 cents. I think that banks themselves will lend XRP. I think other people will lend XRP to banks for them to be able to send transactions over the network. They might use their own XRP. They might swap whatever they have into XRP and send it to the other party. If it's a high value and you're sending drops instead of full XRP, that makes a lot more sense at scale. But I do think that there will be liquidity pools and other ways that people move value using XRP that's not necessarily sending it from one party to the other, as protocols on the network do develop over time. I think they'll be able to deposit their XRP into lending pools or liquidity pools and then be able to earn a yield that way, or use it to be able to transmit transactions without actually exchanging it to somebody else. Is basically what I'm trying to say. So that's the circumstance. So there's other reasons why banks would hold XRP, and governments and anybody else that's in a very treacherous position with debt. And the reason for that is if you've got something on your books that isn't that valuable today and you've run up a bunch of debt, so you have a bunch of liabilities and your assets don't match it, right? So you're in the hole. You have all these unrealized losses like we've heard about at Bank of America and all these other banks. If you had an asset on your balance sheet that went up in value substantially to be able to offset those liabilities and losses, and you didn't have to do anything but start using it, it's pretty easy there. In history, governments has had to revalue things, right? Like, so gold was revalued. People are very well aware of that. Oil and gold have been pegged at certain points in histories, along with other currencies. And I think that that'll happen again. It'll be revalued. But there's not enough gold, there's not enough commodities, there's not enough other assets. And if you revalued them substantially higher enough to actually back the system at this point, it would cause havoc across other industries. The oil price and the gold price would have to be so high to offset the debt at this point that it's just not feasible. So you need a third or tertiary asset that's tier one collateral in the banking system. And instead of having to revalue it, which really wouldn't have any global implications, right? It would only have benefits at this point because there's nobody dependent on XRP, like aside from Ripple, really. And it helps them too because their treasury is all XRP. But just like JP Morgan with silver. But there's no negative consequences of that going up substantially in value. So what? Some people get rich. David Schwartz has said that before. What if a few people get rich? Oh, well. But it would stabilize the debt markets. It would stabilize a lot of things. So just holding it as an asset on your balance sheet does a lot for liquidity and making you whole if we do see a significant price rise. I think that's the other reason that people will continue to hold it. And then once I think it is given a designation as tier one collateral, you need that for derivatives. So in order to be able to participate in the derivatives market, you have to have backing and collateral for those bets. Up to that point, that's been U.S. Treasuries, and people will just borrow and lend it in the same Treasury 10 times, and they all have bets out in the market or derivatives that's backed by the same Treasury that they've just borrowed from somebody else or lent themselves. So there's not enough collateral really to cover the derivatives market at this point. And I think if they introduced XRP as a tier one asset and it had a substantially higher value, I don't know what the backing for the derivatives market is going to be, but even at a fractional case, I think that they could do away with the rehypothecation of treasuries and have gold and XRP as backing for those bets. So those are just some of the reasons that you might hold XRP, aside from just transmitting value or sending payments. AJ, excuse me, a prod says, great stream as always. Now let's talk about the U.S. BTC stockpile. Are you bullish about it? And what about mandatory confiscation? They can't confiscate this stuff, guys. They can make it legal. They can put taxes on it. Like they could put the miners out of business tomorrow. If globally you had G7 or G20 countries all levy taxes on Bitcoin miners because of the CO2 emissions, and they put carbon tax on them, they'd all shut down tomorrow. It would no longer be profitable. The whole incentive to mine on the network is the profit that you make off the Bitcoin, right? and as much as people want to be altruistic and have another money system, it's profit driven at the end of the day. At this point, because the VC firms and the PE firms, and well, it's just the VC firms really, hedge funds, pension funds are starting to make allocations now too. It's about the money. It's about returns. And if there's no money or returns there, people sell it and people stop operating a business because there's no economic value. So they could shut it down at any time. Will they? Based on what Trump and Kennedy said over the weekend here, they seem super bullish on Bitcoin. They're going to get behind it. They want to rah crypto. We want your votes. Get out there and vote crypto. And if they're going to, people vote based on their pocketbook. People in general have an economic incentive. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You may have moral or personal values that you vote on or principles. More power to you there also. Have no complaints. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to eat. And if you're morally aligned with a socialist, but you're starving and you don't have any money and gas prices and everything are so high that you can't live, you start to rethink a lot of that stuff. So you might not like the system the way it exists, but it does incentivize innovation and potentially lower prices, and the people that provide value make a lot of money. So I think it aligns incentives, not all the time, but most of the time. Am I bullish about Bitcoin? I mean, I kind of already gave you my rundown on that earlier. Not particularly. I think we see 75 or 76,000, and that's the top. Again, I'm nobody in comparison to all the large fund managers and everybody else that's telling you that's going to 100,000. I have a feeling, though, that people are going to look back at a lot of the stuff that I've said over the last 6 months, and I'm going to be proven right on multiple accounts as things kind of roll through the next couple months here. So, not overly, like I said, not worried about confiscation. I don't think it'll be valuable enough that people will want it. AJ Trade says, do you think Ripple has bank partners that are yet to be announced, possibly waiting for SEC to cap? Yes, and I think that all of those 1,700 pre-allocated contracts will be mandatory that they're released to the public and unredacted in the disclosures in the final ruling by the judge. And I think that that's going to be a huge wave of euphoria and people running to get XRP because they're going to see the people on that list. And then I think that's a huge wave that they can ride into IPO also, or direct listing. So let me be more specific. I've said they won't be IPO, and people were upset by that. It's still they will become public, but it'll be a direct listing, in my opinion. They won't need the press and the investment banks and all the other stuff that you need to do for an IPO, and they won't dilute existing shareholders. We hold some in the mastermind through our community there. We might get more. We will see. Can't talk about that here. If you guys do want access to private investment, you can go check it out. Right up here, mastermind.beyondbroke.com. BGW says, is the trust you recommend a revocable living trust or irrevocable? Are there any concerns putting an LLC in a revocable trust? So you're discussing living trusts there. There are more than 88 different types of trusts that have like nomenclature attached to them and have been marketed. Trusts are contracts is what they really boil down to. And you can weave different language within the tapestry of a trust and pull different things from different types of trusts or contracts into the one that you set up if you're working with a good trust attorney. Most of the time, we are not using a living trust to harbor or hold digital assets. And the reason being for that is you don't necessarily want to put assets that are going to appreciate a lot into a living trust. Living trusts, and this is just our experience and people that I follow and have conversations with, their advice, much smarter than me, been doing it for 20, 30 years. They recommend living trusts for things that are going to be passed on to your kids that you want to circumvent probate and estate taxes on, but you're going to use during your lifetime, that don't produce cash flow or increase in value substantially. So that might be vehicles, that might be your residences, vacation homes, reduced income. That might even be something that you put in a different type of trust. Family heirlooms, gold and silver. Those are all good things that you might put in a living trust. And it may be revocable or it might be irrevocable. A living trust, depending on where you are in your life and how you feel about the people that are the beneficiaries, you might choose one or the other, right? And our estate planners can walk you through which one of those would be better. The asset protection trust that we set up is an irrevocable trust. It's not a living trust. It's an asset protection trust. It is in Wyoming. We can set it up as a trigger trust. And then we can have backup trusts, in the Cook Islands or other jurisdictions where if you do come under siege or creditor attack or government attack, those assets are, your trustees step down and those things get shifted over to the Cook Islands very quickly. And you don't have to worry about search or seizure or any of the implications that you could have. Otherwise, we have a lot of things set up that people have asked for, put together very creative solutions. But to the point at hand here, An asset protection trust tends to be what we see, and the reason for that is you aren't the trustee on that, which some people have a hard time with. You can still manage the assets if you don't complete the gift. At some point, most people do complete the gift or a portion of it to the trust after they've exhausted their resources outside of the trust to be able to pay the taxes on it or for it. But the you want the assets out of your name, and the benefit of an asset protection trust is it's very difficult for anybody to penetrate. So as an example, a living trust you're the trustee on, I don't want to say you can break the veil easily, but it's easier to break than an asset protection trust because you are the one that's administering things and doing things in it. If you have a distribution trustee and a management trustee and you're working with an RIA, it's no longer in your control, right? So you were in somebody, they see that you look nice, you have a nice watch on, you're driving your G-Wagon, okay? They decide that they're going to come after you because they think you have some money. They're going to phone up their lawyer. They're going to look you up. They're going to find, if he's a good lawyer, he can find your trust, even if your name's not on it. And they're going to come back to that client and tell them, look, it's going to cost you somewhere between $2 and $5 million over the next 2 to 3 years to go after this guy. And there's still a 90% chance that you're not going to get anything. And that's enough to deter most people. They're like, all right, well, he's got it on lock. Like, never mind. I'm not going to go after him. It's not worth that amount of headache and time and capital and resources to try to go after somebody when they really didn't even, and maybe you just really piss somebody off and you do somebody dirty and they have justification for coming after you. But even then, hopefully you're not doing those things. But, I think most of the people in this community are not those type of people. But it would still be very difficult for them to come after you and get anything. And even if they did, let's say they pierce it and you've got a trigger trust set up, those assets go over there to Cook Islands and then it's bye-bye. They're not getting anything. And you could get outside the U.S. And anyway, rich people problems. Yeah, I wouldn't put an LLC in a revocable trust. I would set up an asset protection trust and then have the LLC inside that. So I am not an estate planner. I know enough to be dangerous. I work with professionals. And if you would like their guidance, I'm happy to give you their information, even separate of anything that we offer, so you can have a conversation. Sherry, hey ma'am, she says, hey Jake, you have mentioned possibly using Axos Bank. Do you feel would be a good alternative to Mercury? We're setting up an account there for the fund and stuff that we're doing right now. On the commercial side, it's a bit lengthy to get things set up there. But on the retail side of things, shouldn't be a problem. Their customer service has been great. They've gotten back almost immediately to everything I've said. We haven't held money in an account there personally yet, so I can't completely vouch for them. We won't know what that experience is until we've got it funded and we're working with them in that capacity. But my initial interactions and anything up to this point has been pleasant, and I would recommend them so far. And again, I don't have a personal account there, so I can't attest to that. But like I said, my experience so far has been good. So check it out. Let us know what you think. They are crypto friendly, is the reason I mentioned them in the mastermind. Michael Anthony says, how much correction will Bitcoin have? I wish I knew, man. If I could call the bottom, I could have made a lot of money if I could have called the Bitcoin bottom. If market cycles continue in the same capacity, you normally see somewhere between a 70 and 90% drawdown in Bitcoin during the bear market. So until we know what the high is going to be, again, I think the high is 75, 76,000. Other people think it's a foregone conclusion that it goes to 6 digits and on up from there. I don't think so. But if, let's say it had a 70% correction from, my proposed high, where does that put it? It'd be 49,000 less, so 50,000 less. So it'd pull back somewhere around 20,000. 20. What was the low in the bottom of the last bear market? I think we saw dip into the high 20s last time. So you probably step up from there. Maybe if everything persists and continues at the same rate and has everything moving along, maybe 40,000, 35,000 at a bottom. I personally think it's going to be much more than that, just based on things that I'm seeing. And again, if something were to surpass Bitcoin as the most liquid asset in crypto, I think it would crumble on itself. I think people would capitulate their Bitcoin and move to whatever the other asset was very quickly, including investment banks and enterprises and other things. And I think that that's what's going to happen. Tether's a headwind there, and I know Tether FUD has been around. It's a tale as long as time. But I can't say the word guarantee, but very confident Tether's going to get sanctioned, and when it does, when stablecoin regulation comes in, they're going to have to shore things up on their Bitcoin reserve, which means sell it, and it's going to have some implications for the market. So I'm saying this time is different. I've been wrong, so don't listen to me, but my opinion. Goaty Clothing says, can we see double digits this year? Your hair is looking cool. Thanks, Jake. It's thinning. This is like the ugly duckling phase of the hair transplant. Thank you for your kind words. But I know what it looks like. It's still, it's there. You can see where the hairline was, but a lot of it has fallen out. I guess there's like an aftershock phase where, the hair that's put in does fall out and then the new hair grows from the follicles that are there. So that's what we're waiting on. Hopefully at, 3 months, I got a nice shaggy full head of hair again. That's what I'm hoping for. But anyway, thank you for the kind words. I'm going to say no to double digits. I think if we do, it's going to be for a very short stint. It's either not even all-time high if it's retail-driven demand, a speculative run, or we get utility and they really push liquidity into this to be able to use it at scale, and we're looking at 3 digits or more, in my opinion, over a very short span of time. So a lot of people have asked about double digits. Not a fan of double digits. It's kind of the tweener, like $10 to $13. There's a lot of people that have called for that for forever. I think it's either significantly higher than that on a logarithmic scale, or we don't even touch that and it just flops on itself again. But, I'm hoping for the first one. Eric D. XRP says, I had thought everyone lately has been saying retail got in before the institutions, maybe certain BS coins. With XRP, they had 1,700 allocated contracts, so did we really get in first? I mean, the price is still low, right? It's not as low as it was in 2017 or 2016. I know some people that got in then. Happy for them. Wish I had been around. Wish I had been paying attention to the space. Probably would have made some poor choices. I would have been young and impatient. So this has taught me a lot over the last 4 years. I will say that I feel like I've grown a lot as a person and developed a lot of the traits that I'm going to need to be able to be successful for the long term, because we have had to wait. And I've used that time to really for self-improvement and build businesses and scale things and put myself in a position that I think we're going to be able to help a lot of people. So I'm very grateful for the time that it's taken. But yeah, I would say there are pre-allocated contracts. So what that means is those could be options on XRP, right? So Greg Kidd had an option for 1 billion XRP at 0.003 cents. So $3 million for 1 billion XRP. I don't know if he's executed that. I don't know if there was a time frame on it. I just know that he mentioned that when he was on DAI's channel back in like 2021. So that's how a lot of this could be orchestrated, right? It's not necessarily that these institutions or enterprises or corporations or governments actually hold the XRP. There could be wallets set up for their pre-allocated contracts or these options that they have where they can pay Ripple a certain price, and that's when they get access to those assets. It could be escrowed, you know. There's a lot of ways that you could put this together. There would be a securities offering, because it's a contract on top of the underlying asset. But yeah, it could be that we're in before them, and it could be that we're, I do think there's a lot of banks that received the flare drop from 2020 when the snapshot was taken. I think that's on purpose. I think flare is going to be integral in the FTSO and some of those things will be used at scale by institutions for DeFi. And it could have been a trial deal too for some of the stuff that they're building. But yeah, I think we're still in before. I think we're in before mass adoption and usage. Did we get in before the institutions themselves? Have they been riding it out with us? Quite possible. Atlantic living. Yeah, I saw some things that were going on at the Olympics this year. Very interesting. Not what I would have picked as the opening ceremony or any of the ceremonies, really. Been a really weird time here globally. I like the only other time that I could think of in history that, and I really don't even have like a full vision on this, but like when Rome was collapsing, I feel like there may have been a lot of this stuff going on. And maybe that's just the cycle and how things persist and what happens, and then society collapses and there's, a new one that emerges on the other side of it, which is very interesting to live through, right? What a time to be alive. But be able to tell your grandkids a lot of cool stuff, or not cool stuff, however you want to look at it, with the Olympics in their show. Yeah, I'm hopeful for better days. I've talked about the fourth turning on here before, but if you guys haven't ever read that book, I would encourage you to do it. It's about socioeconomic cycles that exist that tend to coincide with currency cycles as well. Every 80 to 100 years, 4 generations, you have a fourth turning where there's a big divide in society and things are polarized and people are at odds, and there tends to be a clash. And it's in the last cycles that's culminated in a war. And this cycle, I don't think we're going to get the war. I think that there's going to be something else that is a cataclysm or a problem where people come back together and unite. And they've tried to do that a couple different times. We had that in over the Twin Towers. For a period after that, we had America united again, but it was over a tragedy, right? And collateral damage and people's deaths and a lot of not so good stuff. So I'm hoping there's a way to mitigate some of the collateral damage this time, and that there's some other catalyst that brings people back together and unites them. But it's likely that there'll be some type of collateral damage that comes along with it, unfortunately. So I don't know how I got off on that from opening ceremonies at the Olympics, but I did. So. You guys sit here and listen to me rant and ramble on about crazy stuff. I appreciate your patience and willing to take time out to listen to it and ask good questions. Let's see here. Go on down. I'm back up to the top. Mr. X says, I was denied by Mercury, so am I done, or can I call or email them? Once you've been denied, they're not going to set it up for you. You probably said something in the application process. Again, I don't know if you watched my video or not on what to actually say and put in. The people that we had a conversation about in the mastermind, everybody that I've talked to that has put the exact information in that I've told them to hasn't had a problem. Got to be specific about things, unfortunately, with banks. So if you have kind of lost out on that opportunity, I would suggest Chase or Bank of America. And again, I would just go in there and I would say, hey, I have an asset management company. I have some investments. Don't tell them what they are. Don't tell them what they're in. You could say, we invest in things like private equity and real estate and M&A transactions. We look at a broad spectrum of investments and allocate things appropriately. I have a few of these that I think are going to pay out here in the next, couple months. I'm expecting 7 figures or however much you plan on cashing out. And I'd like to go ahead and get a bank account set up with the LLC. And they'll, oh, yes, we would love to set you up a bank account. Can you tell us more about it? Do you have your articles of organization, your EIN, your certificate of good standing? Do you have an operating agreement? They're going to ask you for all those things. In the operating agreement that you take with you to the bank, leave off the capital contributions page. Don't take that up there because it's going to show your digital assets where you got that notarized. Just leave that out. Leave that at home. Or have a copy that doesn't have that on it. Just take that up there for them. And, they're going to ask you, so what type of investments do you do? Again, you're just kind of broad. We invest in a lot of different things. Say I've got some investments that are in a specific technology and a company that are working in a specific industry. It's a tech deal, it's fintech, and I think that we're going to have a liquidity event here in the short term, and I'd like to take some profits and have a nice place to sit it, and then make allocations to other investments from. And they will eat it up, I promise you. Then you never heard me say crypto. You never heard me say digital assets. And you don't have to be specific. Like, don't be aloof about it and be weird. Be excited, because you are excited. You don't have to lie about anything. Just kind of be opaque and broad with your language, and shouldn't have any issues. And eventually, like as soon as on the other side of regulation, you'll be able to go in and say, I have XRP, and people are like, oh, we would love to have you here. I guarantee that that's how this is going to be. But until, we get stablecoin regulation or Bitcoin or whatever else actually gets rolled into the financial system, it's going to be the way it is. And the way it is they view it as volatile and risky, and they don't want to be associated with it. They're still very hands-off. Let's see here. Here we go. Can't win by folding. I like your name. Aren't the banks holding like 550 billion in unrealized losses? Is that going to be a problem? How do they resolve this? So this is exactly what I talked about earlier. If they have XRP on their balance sheet, you have assets and liabilities. If your assets are way down here and it's the sky high liabilities and you have unrealized losses, the only way to shore that up is to have assets that appreciate to offset those losses. If you're holding XRP on your balance sheet, and we did see a move to $100 or $500 or $1,000 XRP over a not so long period, that's a really good way to shore up your balance sheet if you're a bank, institution, corporation, or government that has substantial losses on your books. Michael Anthony says, you must look at a chart to get a better idea which trading in a channel, and if inflation keeps going lower, then these miners will go lower. Yeah, it's quite possible. He says Bitcoin may dip to 45,000, which the Bitcoin miners going much lower. Bitcoin's overbought at the highs today. If you're looking at the RSI and some of the other indicators, I'm with you. I've said that we've either topped or we get one more little pop here to like 75 or 76,000 before it's down, in my opinion. Quantitative tightening. Another good name. You guys have really good names for YouTube. Mine's just my name. He says, hi, Jake. I have the social account with you. Awesome. Glad to, have you in the mastermind group. Ready to upgrade to Carver 1. Very cool. He says, does that give me access to being able to establish an LL3? See, yeah, you don't need to upgrade to to get an LLC, brother. You just go to a different website. So it's digitalfamilyoffice.io. And if you go to services, there's a little drop down that says LLC formation. You don't even have to be a mastermind member to do that, to be honest with you. It's a service that we provide for people. It is $1,000, and we do EIN, articles of organization, registered agent. We need to take some things off there. I wanted to do virtual office for people, and the person we were working with can't deliver on that, so we actually need to take that off there. And then also the bank account. Like I said, we send you a video that walks you through it. I'd have to have power of attorney, power of financial attorney for people to actually be able to set up the bank accounts. Once we actually have found a solution for providing trustee services. Once we do that, we can set up bank accounts on people's behalf for their trust. But in the short term here, I can't set up bank accounts for people. So I need to take that off there. But we do, again, give you a video that literally walks you through step by step on how to set it up with Mercury. And then the last piece, and really the most expensive piece of what we provide, is a template for an operating agreement specific for a holding company for your digital assets. And if you were to go to an attorney and get that drafted up, it would cost you somewhere between low end like $1,800 up to $2,500, and we do all that for $1,000, right? So we try to provide a huge amount of value for a reasonable price for people. I always want people to feel like they got more in value than what they paid in cash. So anyway, Carbon One, if you did want to upgrade there, it would allow you to participate on the private investment deals, and it would give you access to some of the other resources we have on the website. And those resources are more business related than anything, to be transparent. There are some financial resources there, but most of them are, if you're a business owner and you want to scale sales, there's SOPs, there's an SOP on how to write SOPs for your business. A lot of different resources there that can be beneficial for anybody trying to scale, a side hustle or other stuff to be able to earn some more income. So that's what we provide. And business resources and financial education in Carbon One, to be able to participate on the private investments with us in the 506Bs that we run in the community. You have to have two qualifications. One is a pre-existing business relationship, so that's why the mastermind works for that. There's consideration passing between two parties, establishes a business relationship, and then the other piece of that is we have to qualify you as a sophisticated investor, and that is through the business resources and the financial education that we provide, the resources on the website and the other resources that you get in the Carbon One channel. So that allows you to participate. Again, we've done previous deals in Ripple and other fintech companies. We'll continue to expand those options. We got a raise open right now. That's a member we didn't even have anything to do with. That's in the energy and infrastructure sector, which super excited about. And I'm hopeful that, eventually, and I haven't ever talked about this in a public forum, but I'll run it down. We want to empower people. Post price appreciation, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people. You want to be able to have a group of people that have expertise in different areas. So when you're presented with things, like people send me emails all the time. Hey, can you invest in this? Is this a good idea? I'm thinking about investing in this. Would you invest in this? I don't know everything. I'm really good at like three things. Health and fitness, I know a lot about that. Business in general, pretty good at that. And fundraising and capital raising. And then digital assets. Wealth management, taxes. I know a good clip on all that stuff. If you ask me about horticulture, no clue. Ask me about energy, oil, hydrogen, helium, renewable, carbon credits. I don't know. I will go find somebody in my group, in my network, that is the person on that. Ask them. And that's the value of the mastermind, right? So we have people in there that's all they've ever done. We have experts across multiple fields. And they're going to come across things that is in their domain, right? And that was this individual. He's like, this is it, man. Like, I've seen a lot of things. I've looked at a lot of stuff. This seems like a really good opportunity. So we, looked it over with him. And after, kind of giving them our blessing, and you never like, here's the other piece. There's always risk with private investment. There's always risk with any investment, even public stocks go bankrupt, right? So just be aware of that, as we move forward and people do make a lot of money. And if you're trying to reallocate that to other things, there's risk in everything that you do. So, but when there's enough risk and the reward's high, it can be worth it. So anyway, long term, we want the community to turn into basically a deal room where everybody has their niche expertise, then they're bringing that to the table and they're sourcing deals if they want to in their specific domain where they understand that vertical really well. And they bring that back to the group and they've done their due diligence and they have some other people in the group that have also looked over it, given it their blessing. And then we're able to raise capital from everybody and everybody's able to get access to really good stuff. And deals will go bad because that's part of private investment. But, we want to mitigate that risk as much as possible. And we think that a community of very intelligent people all reviewing the same information mitigates a lot of that risk. So anyway, Carbon One would love to have you there. But that's the benefit of Carbon One is you're able to participate in the deals. Honest Aim. Thank you for the super chat, brother. Blessed. He says, thank you for your video on setting up a bank account. I used it. I used it to request ours for the LLC that you helped set up. Mercury verified it in 4 hours. Very cool. I was sweating bullets before the video. Yeah, I'm glad that you were able to get it stood up and ready to go and be able to collect profit on the other side of price appreciation, brother. Thank you for being part of the group. And the kind words. Atlantic Living says, Jake, is the XRP documentary complete, or do you happen to know if they continue to tweak it, add stuff, omit clips? Are you expecting this to wake up the masses and have society shift into crypto? I was blown away that they even asked me to be on it. I was like the third person that they interviewed for the documentary. They flew here to Dallas on their own dime, met me on the coldest day of the year here in Dallas, rented out a spot. We shot it. I can't say enough good things about them. There's been a lot of people that have talked a lot of crap about them for doing this. I can't for the life of me understand why. It's on their own dime. They didn't take money from somebody else to do it. And they've interviewed people that they thought were relevant, right? It's their production. They can interview whoever they want. Because again, they're not taking money from anybody else. So anyway, Maya and Chris, good people. I don't think it's done yet. I think that they are still editing things. I haven't heard from them in a little bit, just to be honest. XRP Vegas, they had some of the showing there, and I think they're still refining it. I know that they interviewed some more people there, and they're editing those clips and putting it in. It's going to be like a series that they're going to be on Netflix. I think that they're actually going to execute and end up being on Netflix, which is super cool. I waive my rights. I don't make any money off of it, right? Like, I just wanted to help them. And they were nice enough to allow me to be in it. So, exposure for me, exposure for our firm. And I think it's just cool. I view it kind of like The Big Short. I think that, on the other side of this, and I think when they release it, it will be on the other side of it. That people are going to be like, wow, there was all these people that were in this niche cult that actually knew that this was going to happen. So anyway, yeah, I don't think that it'll wake people up. I think people will be very aware of it by the time that documentary airs. But I think it might, I'm very public facing, and so I'm going to have some things changed, likely, by the time it does air. So now that you've mentioned this, it makes me aware that I probably need to follow up and figure out when that's going to be. But I think it's going to be sometime in September when they roll it out, maybe October, that they end up getting on Netflix. So good question. And like I said, making me think. Let's Scroll. ISO Lad, appreciate you for the super chat, brother. He says, Jake, how much XRP do you estimate is available on the open market given Ripple's activity? Buy it for ODL, supply shock near. I think that's how you drive price up, right? Is significant demand with a shortage in supply. I estimate that retail holds somewhere between 1 billion on the low end, 2 billion on the high end XRP, and the exchanges have another 3 to 4% beyond that of the total supply. When I talked to Simon, who's the CEO at Uphold, last year in August at the XDC event, he asked me that question, which I was like, the answer to this, but anyway, I said, somewhere between 5 and 6% is what I think exchanges and retail holds, and he was like, that's about right. What? If you knew, why'd you ask me? Anyway, like I said, I think retail holds probably 2 billion. The exchanges are somewhere between 3 and 4 billion in total. If we saw a Tether situation where liquidity in the crypto market was frozen because they sanctioned that asset and XRP was skyrocketing, I think that you would see significant buy orders come in from institutions and other exchanges to be able to drive the price of that up so that they could then use it for liquidity in their own ecosystem. And I don't think that they'll be selling it to the public. I think that they'll be buying it off the open market and like hand over fist. And so, I do think that there's a possibility where there's a quote unquote supply shock to XRP that causes price to rise substantially. Ripple has 4.8 billion XRP that they use for ODL, and the rest of what they hold is in escrow. So, yes, to answer your question. STO Plier says, hi Jake, what's your XRP price to retire? I mean, as in to do only stuff for yourself. I mean, like everyone has a plan to retire, right? I'm weird, STO. I am very competitive. I've always been that way, and I get on a kick for something, and that's what I do. My dad was the same way, very type A, like, this is my thing right now. And he sees it through to whatever it is, the highest level, we compete at the highest level, and then, okay, we've accomplished that mountain, like on to the next one type deal. So I don't think there's ever a circumstance in which I'll retire. I was reading a book this weekend called How to Make a Few $Billion by Brad Jacobs. If you haven't ever read it, if you are an aspiring CEO, if you do plan to, execute at a high level and manage people and build companies, I highly recommend the book. Still got like an hour left in it on Audible, but a lot of great stuff in there. And even him, he'll exit. He's had 7 multi-billion-dollar exits after he's taken companies public. Through roll-ups is his main way of doing that. So he did that Waste Management. He did that for United Rentals. He did that for XPO and a few others. And he sits on his stack of cash and takes a little bit of time off and travels and does some stuff. And then he's like, I'm bored. What's the next business that I'm going to, what industry am I going to disrupt now? I have a bit more purpose behind what I'm trying to do, right? When my, I've said this before, but it's been a while. My dad passed away. He was not very happy with the world. Understandably so. We're still in turmoil. Like I said, we're at the end of this fourth turning here. There's a lot of conflict and people are upset with the way that their data has been managed or the situation with the money is. Society's kind of bending at the strings or bending at the seams. I want to be in a position where I know the data that's going on and can actually make a difference for the average person. His solution for that was get off Facebook and write your congressman. That's not going to do anything. You're a peon. You don't have enough capital or or power or clout or network to really move the needle. And I'm not saying that to like demean him. He's my dad. You know, I love him. But I understand how the world works. And to actually have an impact, you have to have all those things I just mentioned. And so that's the trajectory that I would like to think that I'm on. I want to be in positions where I sit on the board of companies that are very large and have impact and influence. And at those levels, I'll be able to see what's actually going on in those companies, what environmental factors exist, how those things are impacting society as a whole. And then I'm not ever going to be as good as AI or some of these things that are coming down the pike here, but I might be able to provide some solutions that help things or give people a better chance. And so that's my goal with all this. And so that's a purpose-driven thing. It's not like sit on a beach and drink Mai Tais. I get really bored with that after about 3 days. I get antsy. I don't want to be there anymore. I want to go back home and I want to work. Weird. So anyway, what price would I retire at? And to your point here, this is all stuff that's self-induced. It's stuff that I want to work on. It's not like, but I feel like I'm retired now. Like a lot of my days are stressful. I had back-to-back meetings all day today. There was about 45 minutes where I wasn't in meetings from 8 a.m. this morning until 7. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I love what I do. I get a lot of fulfillment from what I do. It's frustrating at times and it's stressful, but I really can't think of anything that would be better served with my time at this point in my life, or forward. There's times when I would rather spend a little bit more time with my kiddo and my wife, but the impact I get to make for other people, I think my kid looks at what I do and the impact that I have for other people and what I'm working on, and if I'm able to inspire him, that's worth foregoing a little bit of time, And I try to make sure I get quality time with him irrespective, but rambling on here. But I don't think there's really a price for me. XRP could be $1 million a piece. I would still work just as hard then as I do now. If money's the object, then you'll fall off at some point. And I guess that's what retirement is, right? But the people that I have seen that are retired, as soon as they do and they lose whatever it was driving them to get up every day, they die. And if you're not growing, if you're not improving, if you're not bettering yourself, if you're not moving, you become stagnant and stale and you regress. You're either going one. It's not like life is stagnant. Like you're either improving and getting better and moving up, or you're regressing. Because as time goes on, the rest of the world's moving and changing around you. So nothing's ever stagnant. So anyway, I know, like I said, rambling on here, but that's my 2 cents on that. This is a good one. He says, Jake, do you think every bull run where crypto goes parabolic only to lose 80% of its value over the next 3 years, XRP would follow suit, or would it stay stable and continue to appreciate? Well, XRP didn't lose 80% of its value between 2017 and after, right? So it went from half of a penny, and the next low beyond that half of a penny after it ran up to $3.84 was 13 cents. So a 26x from its previous low. Now, was that a 90% drawdown from the $3.84? Let's see here. 384 times 0.1. It's actually a little bit lower than that. So it's actually like 95% of its value that it lost. But it's still, like I said, 26x above what the previous low was. So no, to answer your question, no, I don't think that'll be the case. I think once there's enough liquidity in XRP in particular, and it's used at scale, the volume over the network would hold price stability. And as more assets become tokenized on the network, and the network gets adoption in multiple use cases to be able to settle and provide liquidity for other markets, I think that it'll continue to have steps up over time. I think that it'll be stable for long periods, and then we'll have a step up, and then it'll be stable for a long period, and then it'll have a step up. And they'll still need weekends or some other time to be able to do that, because if you had a big step up while transactions were running, it's a problem, right? Because the money on the other side of that transaction is going to be worth a lot more than what it was when it left the other party. But that's with private networks and other networks coming online that are already facilitating transactions at scale and running in tandem with traditional systems like Project Ion, for example. So again, I could be wrong. If we don't see all-time high, yeah, I think that we will. But if we go way past all-time high and we get actual utility, I don't see any circumstance in which it falls like it has in the past. Already at almost an hour and a half. I'm probably going to wrap it up here in about 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, get it in the chat. Am I close to the bottom here? Where am I at? Nope. I'll try to get to all of them, but I'm probably not going to. Jacob Cole says, I'm pretty sure you've mentioned this before, but again, what type of APY are you hoping to achieve with your clients that delegate with you guys in institutional custody? So we actually we're not profitable until we generate you at least 12% yield. That's the way I've set up the structure. So anything north of 10 million in allocation, we only do 40 basis points on. So that's $40,000 on the year. It's all we get, $10,000 a quarter for managing the assets and holding it in custody. And by the time we pay for compliance and custody and our other service providers, that money's gone. Like I can't even pay employee salaries with that 10 grand. So we have to perform. Like there's not an option. We don't. You literally get everything up to 8% return, and then we fee share after 8%. So there's no clawback. That's the pref. You get 8% on your money, full yours, and then beyond 8%, between 8 and 20%, we fee share 80-20. So 80% to the client, 20% to us, and then if we're somehow really just crush it and have a fantastic year, which I'm hopeful that we do occasionally, and we generate north of 20% returns for our clients, then we fee share 50-50 on anything north of the 20%. So again, it's only 80-20 between 8 and 20%. We don't get anything of the first 8% returns. And then if we are able to really just generate outsized returns for our clients, we do a 50-50 split on anything north of 20%. So to answer your question, what type of APIs are you hopeful to achieve? I think we can consistently generate somewhere between 15 and 20% returns for people, if I'm being honest. And I think that's a fair way for us to be compensated well for performance and be able to generate people a lot of return on their assets. And that'll be through an allocation to multiple different verticals and a bunch of different ways to be able to hedge and mitigate risk associated with the downside on that. One of my mentors I don't talk to very often, but I have a lot of respect for, is Howard Getson. You probably have no clue who he is. Very intelligent gentleman, very dry and to the point, which I appreciate. He talks to me like my dad, which he's about my dad's age. When my dad's no longer here, but you get the point. Anyway, he runs an AI hedge fund, and they generate somewhere between 15 and 30% returns for their clients every year, irrespective of market condition, because they have quants that work for them, and they build out algorithms that pull data in and basically make trades based on previous price action across the last 100 years in the stock market, whatever market they're trading in. They don't trade in crypto. Not enough price history. He doesn't have a deep enough understanding of it, and it's too volatile. The vol they like to trade is somewhere between. They mitigate risk. They trade within a band, so they cut losses at 10% to the downside, and they also cut gains at 20% to the upside. So if it appreciates more than 20%, they're out. Like they pull it out. You're always going to be in the green. You're always going to make profit if you're doing that, and you mitigate a lot of risk for loss. So anyway, he's somebody that we'll likely be in contact with and working with. There's a few other people that we've recently had conversations with about building out algorithms using AI, because I think that's really the only way that we'll be able to compete in the future as things progress. So we're allocating resources and time there. But as these different products come onto the market for XRP, liquidity pools, AMMs, and institutional adoption there, I really haven't met anybody that's made any money on AMMs yet. The only person that I know that's made money on the AMMs are people that have set them up. Not the people that have invested in them or provided liquidity to them. So we're going to need to understand those things really a lot better before we start making allocations to them. And again, we want to do that through pseudo accounts. And so we really need XLS64 to be able to pass before we're going to feel comfortable doing that. So, 12 months from now, I think we'll be in a very different place. I think we'll have a lot of DeFi things built out on top of the XRPL and opportunities. And we will continue to evaluate those as they come up and implement them in our investment strategy for clients if they are suited. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of the fees associated with the firm and the projections on the types of returns that we're looking to generate for clients. And if you want financial advice, talk to Mikkel. I'm not a financial advisor. Matt too. Matt Schneider's our other financial advisor at the firm, and CIO. Can't win by folding says he's in Australia. Do the trust and organization recommended you work in our jurisdiction? I know that we cannot set up a universal life insurance policy type setup here, although I'd love to do it. Yeah, the U.S. is real progressive when it comes to life insurance. In most other jurisdictions, life insurance and investments are two very separate things. Here, they're allowed to be commingled and crazy products are made, and it's kind of unregulated. Anyway, obviously you can't do that. But yeah, I would get a family trust set up there in Australia in order to be able to hold your assets in it, and then potentially set up an SPV or an LLC or a vehicle or a company underneath the trust that held your digital assets to be able to manage them. There's been one person that I have had a conversation with there in Australia that had things set up like that before they ever spoke to me. That individual used to be a CEO at a company that was traded on the Australian Stock Exchange that was worth $300 million at one point. Very sharp guy, very well connected there in Australia. But that's how he had his stuff set up, was he had a family trust. Underneath family trust was an SPV or an entity there that held the digital assets. And he was, got to pay the taxes to get them in there before they appreciate. That's really what it's going to come down to. If you're going to continue to keep your assets in Australia, if you're going to move offshore, you might look at Dubai or Singapore or some popular jurisdictions outside of Australia. You're going to have to be very diligent about not visiting Australia more than the days that are listed. Anything to do with the Commonwealth, they're very particular about getting their money. So, I don't know what it is there. I know in the UK it's like 76 days. You can't spend more than 76 days a year in the UK, even if you're a UK citizen, if you want to be taxed in a separate jurisdiction. And so I think that would be similar there in Australia, just because it's under the Commonwealth. So those would be the things I would be looking at. I'd be looking at, establishing trusts in those other jurisdictions. If I did plan to leave Australia, if you do plan to, stay in Australia because your family's there, you've always lived there, you want to live there, then the family trust, domestic there. John Basilos is our guy. Happy to make an introduction to him, and he can help you set that up. If you just want to email me at info at digitalfamilyoffice.io. Happy to pass his information along to you to get that set up. And that's the other cool thing. We've been really proactive about creating partnerships with people in multiple jurisdictions. When I first started doing this stuff in the U.S., people would ask me about Canada and the UK and the broader EU and Japan and Brazil and Australia. And I was like, I try to call these people and they don't want anything to do with me. They think I'm crazy. And that was a lot of the professionals here, domestic in the US, when I called them. And that was kind of how I was able to sift through a lot of the BS too. But anyway, just through, organic outreach from other people in those jurisdictions and people that have had their stuff together, we've had a really just super blessed to have introductions made for us. And so now we have counterparts and partnerships across the globe to help people set up entities and get themselves set up before price appreciation, which is super cool. We get on down here to the bottom for the last couple minutes. Carl says, thank you. Appreciate you, Carl. For those that don't know Carl, he does life insurance and he does employee benefits. If you need insurance or help with your company, he's helped lots of people make sure that they're set up correctly. There's a lot of people that sell crappy insurance and will do whatever's best for them and their paycheck. I really value my friendship with Carl because he's not one of those people. He has integrity, and I've seen him forego money in his pocket to help other people and make sure that they were set up and get what was right for them. So those are the type of people I want to align myself with. So if you guys have any insurance needs, benefit needs, other stuff like that, please reach out to him. Take one more before we wrap it up tonight. Let's try to make it a good one. There's lots of good ones, but I'll do this one. Brian says, hey, Jake, recently you contrasted Uphold as a brokerage to Coinbase and Kraken as exchanges. That is correct. What are your thoughts about holding some of your assets there, Uphold, in addition to cold wallets? I did that for a long time before we had institutional custody and the stuff that we've set up now. I like Uphold. I think that they're going to be around. They have their securities license. I think Simon and everybody there are very well positioned. Maybe even for an IPO in the not too distant future. And yeah, I like Uphold. I think that their security is good. I wouldn't say exceptional. Just again, we're spoiled with a lot of stuff that we have. Same thing for cold wallets. I would Trezor or Decent is really what I prefer over anything else. I think we actually have a link on the YouTube channel if you guys want to check them out. If you don't have enough to hold your assets in institutional custody, that's who I would recommend. That's the cold wallet that we support and I like the most. And the main thing is you have a biometric with it, which is great. And then also the user interface on it is super easy in comparison to Ledger and some of the other stuff that I've used in the past. So, but yeah, I think that's a great strategy, especially if you plan to liquidate a portion of your bag, holding that on Uphold, setting limit orders there. Great strategy. If you do have enough that it's going to be meaningful and you want their OTC desk on their institutional side, most people don't know that Uphold has an institutional side. They haven't really done a good job of marketing that. But happy to make an introduction there if it's meaningful. They do want you to trade, $250,000 on at least a quarterly basis if you're going to keep that account open. But if you think you're going to trade $250,000 this quarter with price appreciation, like I said, happy to make an intro. So again, you just email me at the same address that I stated before, and that's info@digitalfamilyoffice.io. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you for your time this evening. Soft plugs as always. If you like this, if you think this is valuable, we'd love to have you in the mastermind group. Just friend me on LinkedIn. And you can go to mastermind.beyondbroke.com and get a subscription there. See you in the Discord. We talk about a lot of this stuff on Saturdays and Mondays. Yeah, run it down. Things are a little bit more intimate there. I talk about a lot of the conversations that I'm having with some of these institutional players and stuff that we have going on. And then aside from that, we do the private investments, which is, I don't think anybody else does that. I know that they don't. And then, if you do want to consult with me or my team, you can check out digitalfamilyoffice.io or go to digitalwealthpartners.net if you want the financial advising side of things. So again, appreciate you guys. I hope you'll have a wonderful evening, and we will see y'all on the next one.